I'm excited for the Reading Symphony's opening concert of the 2021-22 season. Here's a little bit of information about Camille Saint-Saëns' Bacchanal. The biographer James Harding tells the story of a devout French peasant who bought a packet of chocolate, which also contained a picture of a saint, sort of like the bubblegum baseball player trading cards of yesteryear. The peasant's son was seriously ill, and all of her prayers had gone unanswered. She decided to try out this new saint, vowing always to display the picture on her own person. The boy recovered, and ever afterwards she carried reverently, attached to her bosom, the yellowing likeness of Camille Saint-Saëns. Such was the fame of this prolific composer. A true child prodigy, he started composing when he was 3. Over a very long and productive life, he wrote nearly 200 works in almost every genre. Once in the avant-garde of French composers, and considered dangerously subversive, he lived long enough to be called an old fogey. By the turn of the century, the novelist Romain Rolland could write, "It's odd how one can talk with musicians for hours about French music without thinking of once mentioning the name of Saint-Saëns." Saint-Saëns' first successful opera started out as an oratorio based on the biblical story of Samson and Delilah. His librettist convinced him to turn it into an opera. He played it at home to a select audience who could make nothing of it at all. After a second unsuccessful hearing, Saint-Saëns gave up. 5 years later, he took it up again and finished it in 1876. It took 13 years before Samson and Delilah was staged in France. Nowadays, it is the only one of his 13 operas remaining in the repertoire. The Danse Bacchanale appears in the third act inside the Temple of Dagon, where the Philistines are celebrating their victory over Samson. The oriental-sounding oboe cadenza at the beginning, the sensuous melody in the middle, and the wild TOGA PARTY ending demonstrates why this piece has been a perennial favorite for audiences. 3 of the songs that Renée Fleming is singing on the Reading Symphony's gala opening concert are by American composers. The Great American Songbook is dominated by songs from Broadway, and for decades, the songwriting duo of Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II seemed to dominate Broadway. Their last collaboration was The Sound of Music. It is a fictionalized account of the real Von Trapp family, their governess Maria, and their escape from recently Nazified Austria. The original Broadway production in 1959, featuring Mary Martin as Maria and Theodore Bikel as George Von Trapp, won 5 Tony Awards. And then there is the 1965 film adaptation featuring Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer. It won 5 Academy Awards, and the film's soundtrack is one of the most successful soundtrack recordings in history. Only Gone with the Wind and Star Wars have sold more theater tickets. The songs in The Sound of Music are all part of the fabric of American culture. We all seem to know all of the tunes and words, especially the opening song, The Sound of Music. Early on, in what seems like an interminable pandemic, the Wisconsin-based poet Kitty O'Meara sat down with a cup of tea, wrote a 113-word poem, and posted it on Facebook to a close circle of friends. Things quickly escalated as the post was shared and reshared. Since then, And the People Stayed Home has been translated into many different languages, sung, prayed, danced to, taught, and turned into a children's book. Oprah Winfrey has named O'Meara the Poet Laureate of the pandemic. Now published, the poem is dedicated to the people who can't stay home, the helpers, the healers, the real heroes. One of the people that received the Facebook repost was composer John Crigliano. I felt the urge to set this poem to music, he writes, and I envisioned the performer as a single person at home, singing without accompaniment, without the glamorous setting or technical effects that such a document could entail. He sent his song to his friend Renée Fleming. She already knew the poem, he writes, and was able to use her extraordinary voice to project both its simplicity and its intensity while recording the performance on her iPad in her home. It could not have been done better. After that first summer of COVID-19 pandemic, when everything had shut down, arts organizations made valiant attempts at opening up. The images are surreal. Just a few performers socially distanced on stage and a handful of masked audience members, even more socially distanced. On Saturday, September 26, 2020, the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. presented its first foray into live performance since the previous March. Numbers of performers on stage, maybe 9. Number in the audience, 42. Number of vacant seats, 2,364. The guest performers were Renée Fleming and Vanessa Williams, and the title of the program was A Time to Sing. One of the songs presented that evening, The Diva, was written especially for that concert by Andrew Lippe, the longtime musical director for Kristen Chenoweth, for whom he wrote the hit song Evil Like Me. He wrote the music and lyrics for Big Fish, The Addams Family, and the music for the Farnsworth Invention. He has also written an oratorio, I Am Harvey Milk. Andrew Lippe was born in England and grew up in Oak Park, which is a suburb of Detroit. He graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in music education and began his career teaching middle school music in New York City.